We're going to start our meeting, and since we are operating under special COVID-19 rules, I'm going to go to our clerk, and she's got an official statement for us.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So as Chair Miller mentioned, we are conducting this meeting via teleconference, which is pursuant to the Brown Act waivers provided for under the Governor's executive order in response to COVID-19. For our board members this evening, please mute your microphones following roll call until it is your turn to speak and keep them muted. To indicate you have a question or a comment, please use the raise hand function in Zoom, and Chair Miller or I will announce you. A friendly reminder that all actions tonight will be by roll call vote. If at any point you need to leave the meeting, please send me an email so that I can note that in our minutes. For members of the public who are joining us via teleconference, if you would like to speak during the public comment period, please use the raise hand function in Zoom, on the bottom of your screens, and Chair Miller and I will announce you. For members of the public who are joining by phone, please send your public comments to me at the email address listed on our agenda, or you can also dial *9 on your phones, and that will alert us that you have raised your hand. If any board members or members of the public are experiencing any technical difficulties during the meeting, just please email me and I will do my best to troubleshoot. And with that, I will turn it over to our chair.
You're mute.
We've called the meeting to order, and I think the real trick is if I could get everybody to stay on mute, except for when we're speaking. And we need to try and sequence it so only one person's talking at a time, because to the public and the recording, it just comes out as a mess. And if I do not administer everything perfectly, please bear with me. These are unusual circumstances, and as we all become more proficient, the meetings will get better. So we've called the meeting to order. If we could get the roll call, please.
Yes. Thank you, Chair. And you'll see on your screens, I have the list on roll call. This will also be the order in which we do our roll call voting. Chair Miller?
Here.
Vice Chair Smith?
Here.
Gibbons?
Here.
Sinks?
Here.
Tovar?
Here.
Fliger?
Here.
Tyson?
Here.
Rennie?
Here.
Montano?
Here.
Elahi?
Present.
Thank you. Martinez Beltran?
Here.
Ellenberg?
Here.
Thank you. And Abekoga is not present yet. She will be joining us a little bit later.
Okay, excellent. Okay, at this point, we will take public comment on items not on the agenda. Is there any member of the public that wishes to speak to something that is not listed on the agenda? If you're interested, please raise your virtual hand or send the message to the clerk. Pause for a minute. Seeing no virtual hands, I'll check with the clerk. Do we have any public comment not already on the agenda?
No public comment received. Okay,
so we will move forward from public comment. Next up is our consent calendar. There's a significant number of items on the consent calendar. Everybody's had an opportunity to review these and discuss them with CEO. At this point, is there any items that anybody wishes to pull for further discussion? So Nancy? Unmute.
I'm just ready with a motion.
Yeah, if nobody wants to pull, please go ahead and make your motion, Nancy.
Happy to second it.
Okay, so I believe Nancy made the motion, and I believe Susan seconded it. And I appreciate everybody super fastidious with the microphone, but when you're the guy who's the focus, you can unmute for a little while. We're just trying to keep the rogue mics from going. Okay.
I didn't hear the motion. I'm guessing it was to approve the consent calendar.
That was my understanding. Nancy, would you like to repeat it?
I said I was ready with the motion, and I moved that we approve the consent calendar. And maybe my second will re-second, just to be clear.
Susan was our second.
Susan's eating dinner. That's why I keep turning my camera off.
But you still second the motion.
I still second the motion.
Okay, we have a
I'm
motion.
right here, just chewing.
Yeah, we have a motion and a second. I'm going to go to the public. Is there any member of public who wishes to comment on any item on the consent calendar? If you wish to, please raise your virtual hand. I am seeing none. I'll look to the clerk. Do you have any indication of anybody wishing to speak?
No comments.
Okay. At this point, are there any comments from members of the board? I will just note that we did include the executive committee report, the finance committee and audit committee. As these things happen, we're just putting them on consent calendar rather than trying to have us report out just for expediency's sake. But we've all had our opportunities to review those prior to them being published. So any other comments on this? Then we're going to go to the clerk for a vote, please.
Chair Miller,
Aye.
Vice Chair Smith,
Aye.
Gibbons,
Aye.
Sinks,
Aye.
Tovar,
Aye.
Liger,
Yes.
Tyson,
Aye.
Rennie,
Aye.
Montano,
Aye.
Elahi,
Yes.
Martinez Beltran,
Aye.
Ellenberg.
Aye.
Thank you. That motion carries with Director Abekoga absent.
Perfect. Thank you for that. And thank you to my fellow board members. I feel like I have to thank everybody after every vote because it's gotten so much more complicated. Okay, we're moving on. Our regular calendar. We start with our CEO report. Girish, tell us what's going on.
You can hear me?
Yes.
Great. So we have attached reports to the CEO report, written reports. Please ask me questions on that if you have any. I'd like to just take a minute to report on SVCE staff. And we are going through a very unique time, as all of you are. And just very, I'm not sure what the word is, but proud to be working alongside a group that is very mission driven, and in spite of all the changes that we have to make right now, has just shown a tremendous amount of adaptability. They're very productive and agile. You know, things are changing day to day. New processes, new procedures, new ways of having to look at data and information, and staff has been working extremely hard on making sure that we continue to service our mission. Also wanted to thank the board for the support in allowing us to have a very productive staff and allowing us to have a very good workplace. So open to any questions you may have on the different reports that are in front, that are attached to the CEO report.
Does anybody have any questions that we want to have our CEO expound upon at this time? I will ask the obvious question, which
will
is
make a
the energy
motion.
market and the economy are crazy. How do you feel that we are responding to the instability in the energy markets and the craziness with demand, and how are we pulling it all together?
So this gets to the agility, productivity of our staff, and you know that our load has decreased, and not only are we looking at the past, we're also looking at the future in terms of what our load forecast is. We're working with other CCAs, we're working with the regulatory agencies to update these forecasts. In terms of the power markets itself, with the reduction in demand, we have had a price decrease, which will impact us next year with an increase in the PCIA. So we've already identified the PCIA as something that is not just high, but also volatile. So we'll continue to have that challenge. The way in which you want to manage that challenge is to have strong reserves, which is what SVCE has. And we do have some additional items coming up, especially in terms of increasing our capacity to manage these changing times, in terms of getting more capacity to SVCE, and that's in item 3 in terms of a request for 2 new positions. So we're working with our team, both our employees and our extended team of Ascend, PEA, Z Global, MAR Consulting, to make sure all our bills get paid, make sure that we are scheduling in real time. We've given more flexibility to our scheduling coordinators to follow our daily load patterns, which are different than what it used to be. Overall, I'd also report that our load has decreased about 9% since we started shelter in place. But I think given what we have, the situation, we are doing probably as well as one could hope for.
I think you've done exceptionally well. So more than we could even hope for. And I'm grateful for all the work that staff's done. Liz?
I was just going to say something similar, which is I think when you have as complex a business as we do and rely on expertise and special consultants, that staff has done an excellent job validating of all the vendors and consultants that we are utilizing and establishing backup for all our staff so that the organization can comfortably deal with any of the unexpected things associated with our current COVID-19 quarantines and potentials. So I wanted to just acknowledge that I thought staff has done an excellent job understanding the challenge and evaluating not only what the consultants can do, but also what's the organization itself needed to do to protect itself and be resilient. So I think I was very, very pleased with the level of detail that was brought to those issues.
Thanks, Liz. Rod and then Javed.
Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate this much. So I'll keep this brief. I know we took the decarb programs on consent, but I was really happy to see us moving forward with multifamily housing charging. And I wondered if you had any brief comments you'd like to make on what we've done despite everything and moving forward with our decarbonization programming.
I'm going to hand this over to Amy Bailey, our Director of Decarbonization Programs, to unmute and speak to that.
Hi there, can you hear me?
Perfect.
Yeah.
Okay, great. I figured I'd double check. Right, so through our electric vehicle infrastructure joint action plan, we identified multifamily housing as certainly a sector that's experienced significant barriers to EV adoption. And we've been moving forward as described in the program's update with both technical assistance and also we actually have 2 of our recent 3 innovation on-ramp pilots focused on really trying to tackle this sector and unlock access to EVs to renters and folks in multifamily residential. So one of them is a low power charging pilot with a nonprofit organization called Ecology Action. And then the other one is with a company called EV Match, which describes itself as like the Uber for EV charging, and that they manage a reservation system. And so we're doing a lot both on the innovation front and also the really bread and butter technical assistance front for multifamily, especially so they'll be well positioned once the Cali VIP incentive project launches soon, since we hope that there will be significant deployment in that sector through that program as well.
Well, I'll just say that I'm in great appreciation. The Air District has also identified this as a real issue. And if we're going to, really make a difference on climate, we're going to have to get to everybody. And so thank you for your good work. And maybe at a future time, rather than hearing you on consent, we can hear you. You can give us, I think the board deserves to hear more about what the fine work of your team is.
Besides,
We'll schedule that.
Amy, you have the best title in the world, Director of Decarbonization. I mean, that's like, I am here to save the world. So you gotta love the title. Javed, do you have a question or comments?
Yeah, I just had a comment and a question, I guess. And the first question was basically the load has diminished. I assume that's mostly commercial enterprises that are closed down and are not pulling the load. And the reverse of that question, or the other side would be, have, are you seeing a reduction in costs by sellers of electricity to us? Because if our load has diminished, so has everybody else's, and the demand has gone down. So, and you're kind of like in a stormy sea right now, so you can't really predict where the ship is going to end up with the demands going high and low all at the same time or one after the other. The third thing is I saw an article in the Wall Street today, I guess it's yesterday probably, where in Nevada, they're building a huge solar farm, spending billions of dollars on that. So it looks like there's some really, and this is Warren Buffett who's involved with that. I assume some of you have also seen that. So there seems to be a very serious effort to put billions of dollars now into solar farms. And that should hopefully assist us in getting carbon-free electricity.
So I'll address these. Sorry, are you done with your question?
Yes, yes.
So our load on the small commercial, medium commercial side has decreased about 22, 24%. Our large industrial has gone down about 13, 14%. And our residential load has increased. It's kind of bounced around between 8 to 14% for a net of about 9% decrease. You're right that the overall.
Paresh, could you say that one more time? Sorry.
So commercial, small commercial has reduced about 22%. Industrial has reduced about 14, and residential's up about 12.
Thank you.
For a net of about 9% decrease. So this is not, as you've said, Javed, this is happening all over the country. And so there has been a reduction in prices. And we've seen it kind of bounce around a little bit. And as we are doing our hedging, we did buy some power a few weeks ago at a cost about 10% less than what we had budgeted for. But the last hedge we did was pretty much on par. When we look at the forward curves, we're seeing some reductions for the rest of this calendar year. But coming back into next year, prices seem to be holding steady. So that's what it is looking like right now. And your last point about solar, yeah, there continues to be investment in solar energy storage. And there's a lot of activity going on in that in terms of making sure the essential workforce that would build it would continue to do so. There are some issues in terms of getting financing, but that's not affecting what's happening right now. It may affect what's going to happen in the future, but our projects that we've signed up for so far, touch wood, seem to be going forward as planned. We will update you if there are any changes to it, both on the state side and the federal side. I think in the state, the Senate budget proposal had some proposals related to clean energy investments, and there's also that talk on the federal side. So we have to see, but feel pretty bullish that even if there is a slowdown, things will come back in the near future.
And we can weather anything they throw at us.
Yeah, I can I just follow up a little bit
Yeah,
with
please.
with the gas prices going down to under zero in some cases. Is that having an impact with more people trying to stick around with the oil as a source than switching to gas, carbon-free sources?
So oil prices went under zero, correct? But that was just like a 1-2 day thing. That was a storage issue in the futures market. Overall, the oil price reduction does lead to, there is also a natural gas price reduction. The big impact to us is going to be on the PCIA. So I've told you already about how it's affecting our hedge prices, which we've saved a little money, but really not, we don't see that extending. We're not seeing the prices being low in the future years. But I think since this year's prices are lower, we do expect that PG&E will be buying power at lower prices, and therefore the PCIA will be higher next year. Not sure if this answered your question, but if there are any follow-ups to pricing and hedging, I'll be happy to also talk to you about this offline.
Yeah, thank you. That's fine.
All right. Any other questions or comments with respect to the CEO report? I do need to check in with the public. So let me see, is there any member of the public that wishes to comment on our CEO report? If you are, please raise your virtual hand. Okay, I am seeing none. Let me check with our clerk. Have we received any public comment on this?
No public comment received for this item.
Okay, so unless anybody has any final thoughts or questions, I think we're done with item 2. It was a discussion, and we're going to move on to item number 3, which is going to be our mid-year operating budget, and that's going to be presented by Don Eckert.
Hey, good evening. Thank you, Chair Miller, and good, excuse me, good evening, fellow directors. Just wanted to remind everyone that this is a voting item tonight, not only on the budget, but also Resolution 2020-15. And also a reminder that we are amending our financial plan that we passed back in last September 2019. And I don't need to remind everyone how much has changed since then. So for many of you, you're probably making decisions on budgets for your cities and towns for the new fiscal year, July 1. Just a reminder, our fiscal year ends September 30th. And let's get right then into the highlights of the mid-year 2019-20 budget. So last month, we had our rates proceeding discussion, and we had some assumptions that we talked about in making that rates direction, such as a 21% increase in the PCAA that Girish has talked about. We assumed a 10% annualized load reduction. As you heard from Girish, we're currently running about 9%, a little over 9%. So we're good to leave that assumption as is into this mid-year budget. And we had a commitment of 20 million into reserves, and then another 10 million into a customer relief and community resiliency fund, or CRCR. And indeed, this mid-year budget adjustment supports our commitment from last month's meeting with a $20 million infusion into cash reserves. We also, as part of the mid-year budget process, did our scrubbing on our operating expenses. And certainly those operating expenses were influenced with the current state of the economy and the issues of the shelter in place. So we reduced our operating expenses by a shade under $8 million. Majority of that, or 6.2 million, was on the power supply side, absolutely related to the reduction in load that we just talked about. So less load, less power costs to serve that load. But also we found around 1.7 million in non-energy expenses. And that had every department understanding that the times that we are in, we looked at any favorable budget variances year to date, and then also looked out the next 5 months for changes to changes to their priorities, such as examples, probably not looking at many marketing events out in the public for the next 3-4 months. As then staff is not working on issues like that, it gives them a chance to maybe internalize more work, which allowed us to cut the professional services budget. We had reductions in travel or attending conferences, even our building rent. We assumed a June 1 ribbon cutting date. Now probably looking at late summer, early fall for that movement. So everything was adjusted for every department, and certainly the environment that we're in right now influenced that. At the end of the day, this mid-year budget supports the 4% disc to PG&E that we talked about last month at the rates proceeding. And we also, as I mentioned before, a $10 million CRCR funding. However, as we looked at savings we found in the budget scrub, we want to keep to that commitment of 20 million to go to reserves, and whatever we could find extra in the budget, let's put them into the CRCR. So we've actually upped the ante from 10 million to 12 million into the CRCR. As far as the allocation of that funding, that will be in a presentation following mine by Don Bray to get into the detail of what's being funded. But it will be presented in a way that it will stick to the $10 million allocation of programs. And this extra 2 million we found through the budget scrubbing process, we'll keep that in the CRCR fund as contingency in case we've under forecasted a demand in a certain program related to CRCR. We've also maintained 5 million in the decarbonization and grid innovation energy efficiency programs. Next slide, please. Thank you. So just to review the timeline, because usually when we're talking mid-year budget, mid-year for us is around February or March timeframe. So this year we're doing it in May, a little bit late, but the real driver on this budget is where we landed with rates and that impact to our revenues. So we went through that discussion as we talked about in the last slide in April with a direction on rates. Then in late April, we actually got the actual rates from PG&E that were released. And so we assumed 21% PCIA. We came in very close to that. We assumed a 0.5% increase in PG&E rates. The actual rates themselves came in around 1%. So close enough that we could maintain that 4% discount. And when those rates were released, Don Bray's area worked furiously with Calpine to have those rates effective May 1st. So indeed, those rates are effective as we speak today. We then had a review with the executive committee a few weeks back. Didn't really get into the numbers of the budget as we were still conducting internal meetings with all the departments, but we did talk about 2 new positions that we would like to add to our table of organization covered in the resolution tonight, and we'll talk about that later. And then that brings us then to tonight with a review and a vote for adoption of the mid-year budget. If you need some numbers to take back to your constituents, our year budget supports 290.2 million in energy revenue. We talked about the assumptions already, the drivers for that roughly $28 million decrease in the original plan for revenues. We're also then looking at a $6.5 million cut in power supply costs, certainly related to the less load that we're serving. That leaves us around 51 million for CRCR, the programs and other operating expenses and debt service. We tallied up the other operating expenses, including netting out the increase in investment income that we're projecting. And with the increase in the CRCR plus 5 million for programs, that then takes us to the final number of 20.1 million. So one point I would get out of this slide, just beyond the top level numbers, would be if you look at our other operating expenses of 30 million. So compared to many of your cities and towns, it might be just the opposite, where we have a low fixed cost versus a very high variable cost with power supply, versus maybe many of your cities and towns where it's just the opposite, a very high fixed cost versus a low variable cost ratio. Next slide, please. I don't want to go through every box on this slide. This is just a very high level summary of what went up and what went down to get us to that $30.5 million decrease from the original plan in surplus. But just looking at the top boxes on the second row of the org chart, we talked about energy revenues, talked about power supply. We're actually looking at about $500,000 in savings on the billing side. So the contract that you approved with Calpine back in December, that's in effect now, certainly had some favorable pricing for us to help us there. We talked about other operating. I've upped the investment income to about $2 million a year based on year-to-date performance. And then we're looking at a net of 10.7 million in increase transfers. So we have 12 million going into the CRCR. The programs budget had 6.3 million. About half that was reduced because of our formula to fund it. So just for the folks that may not remember this, the programs budget is funded through a 2% of our operating revenues formula. And if operating revenues go up or down, that program's budget is adjusted accordingly. So about half that 1.3 million is a reduction because of the formula. The other half was just looking at funds that were available and transferring those as well into the CRC. Next slide, please. This slide then focuses on the second half of the voting item for this agenda item, and that's Resolution 2020-15. Did I hear noise? Okay, I thought I heard a question. And so we conducted an operational audit. It's actually still ongoing, but the first phase of that audit was a focus on power resources and looking at data governance. And it was a reminder to us of what our current state is and our future state, which is quickly approaching, if not already there. And so the positions that we're looking for to add tonight would be a senior data engineer, as well as a principal power analyst. So it would be to strengthen the CARB and Grid Innovations Department, as well as the Power Resources Department, with the idea that really both those positions are going to support various other departments as well. Our current state, just as a reminder, so we are we're in negotiations with long-term procurement, and we have another contract on the agenda tonight. As a response to direct access, we're developing customized contracts for some of our high load customers. Don Bray's got a few that are moving up the chain as we speak. And we get, one thing that was noticed from the consultant in the operational audit is how much data that this agency gets bombed with, both in inputs as well as reporting and outputs and depositing all that data. And the consultant noted that. So as we look at our future state, all these long-term PPAs that we're signing have to be managed once they're signed. And so it's not just through the development phase, but then those PPAs become assets that are producing energy, we have to manage those. And in at least one case, if not more, we're going to be the scheduling coordinator. We'll be responsible for optimizing that asset. Once we sign the contracts with some of our customers on the, for the high load customers, we're going to have to manage those contracts. And overall, we're looking to add these positions to mitigate operational risk. We have very few people responsible for a $245 million power supply budget. And as that portfolio gets more complicated and more assets to manage within that portfolio, it puts a higher risk to us and on the agency, and any mistake in that area because of the numbers will be quite visible, so and costly. So positions are also looking to, these positions are looking to mitigate that operational risk. And then we talked about the large amounts of data that hits this agency, and senior data engineer would be part of their role would also be including agency-wide data governance and architecture to manage all that data. And that's where this person would be touching every department, because we're all using data and all producing reports out of that. I'll pause on this slide to see if to open it up if Grish has any other comments. Otherwise, I'll move to the final slide.
I'll just add something maybe in context. I know that this is a sensitive time in terms of each of the cities are going through budget shortfalls, and you are all considering layoffs. You furloughed temporary employees, you're considering layoffs. So the question, I think, would be an obvious question is like, well, why are you hiring at this point? I think Don has laid out the reasons why. I'll just add to it. It's managing risk, and we are adapting to the changes in our business and in our own growth. And lastly, from a expense standpoint, I just reiterate a point that Don made earlier. Our employee expenses are approximately 2% of our budget. I know every one of your cities, your employee expenses are probably between 65 to 85% of your budget. So it's a big part of your cost. It's a very small part of our cost, but that doesn't mean we should be adding positions that are not needed. This is something that is needed. And as we show in an upcoming slide, we have one of the lowest number of employees from a CCA perspective. I actually think, and I plan to propose in the next year's budget, a few more positions to be added. We are experiencing over the last 6 months some level of burnout with employees. At the same time, it's managing the risks and taking advantage of opportunities that are presented to us. And so, of course, open to answering questions when it's open for that. Thank you.
Before we move past this, Fred, you have a comment or question that seems pertinent right here. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. No, Girish, thank you for that. Girish and I had a conversation earlier about this specific item here. And obviously the question I asked is this the right time that we should be hiring? Obviously with everything going on, and, you know, obviously the 2% of our entire budget is on employees, but also the burnout, sort of what you talked about. Girish, in comparison of other sort of agencies, for example, these two positions in particular, when you look at, we're looking at total cost for these two positions, we're looking at roughly with benefits, $200,000 and $215,000. Compared to other agencies like East Bay Energy, does that compare with what sort of they're paying these two positions here? And the main question I have is, will it have any effect, these positions, will they have any effect on the current positions that we have, or the current employees we have? Will there be any layoffs due to this sort of, you know, wanting these positions here?
Yeah. Well, I'll get to the second question first. No layoffs are planned or contemplated. I think if we go down that path, we will be digging an unneeded hole that would be very difficult to come out of, and it would be very negative to our financial reserves, I believe, and our mission. It depends on where, if we have layoffs, where we do that. So it's not something that I am recommending, and I don't expect to recommend it. That the situation doesn't require it right now. As far as the salary level, Fred, it is comparable, but you mentioned East Bay Clean Energy. East Bay Clean Energy does pay quite a bit more for similar positions. They are actually probably the most sophisticated when it comes to data management. But both these positions are market-based. We'll go out to the market and recruit folks. If we have issues with the salary in terms of inability to recruit at this salary level, we will come back to you with a request to change the level.
There's a couple other people who want to speak on this exact point, and just so the board knows, right, Don stopped mid-presentation, so let's take the questions related to the new positions now. So if anybody's got any other ones, we can pile on. I do want to make one quick comment just so we have it in the right light. We're still adding $20 million to reserves in this extremely adverse economic situation. We are a prosperous enterprise, and you don't start laying people off in a prosperous enterprise, especially our staff that's going above and beyond the call of duty for all jobs that are all critical. In fact, I worry that we are too thin of an organization, and that one small hiccup or one fortuitously bought lottery ticket could desperately impact our business. And so again, this organization is not what we're going through in the cities where we're seeing revenue shortfalls. This organization is still going to be banking 20 million net surplus after we consider all these other programs and opportunities, including helping those that are in desperate times and funding expansion of our decarbonization mission. So anyway, if anybody has anything on this specific item related to staffing. I think now would be a good time to complete the thought process. And I have Javed, Liz, and then Rod in that order so far. So go ahead, Javed.
Thank you, Chair Miller, and what you said is apt. I mean, this is an exciting organization. I mean, what we are doing here, and the staff is doing it mainly, is providing carbon-free energy, and that's going to have a very long-term impact. So I think we are going through a process where there may be a short-term load decrease, but it is going to increase. I think we are going to be providing more services. And my question was going to be, how much, what projections do you have as far as the growth is concerned? I mean, short term, the load's gone down, but over the next 2 to 5 years, where do you see the load to be, and how much more can we serve? I mean, are we serving all the residents of Santa Clara County right now? I know we're not serving all the commercial enterprises, but is that where the opportunity is? And do you need a different kind of staffing to address that opportunity compared to the residential market?
Okay, great questions. In terms of our midterm projection, we're still developing it, but the snapshot estimate as of today is a 5% reduction in load in 2021 and a 3% reduction in load in 2022. In terms of maybe capturing additional load, I don't think residential is the place to go. It's just so small. That's not where we would get additional revenues. It would be on the commercial industrial side. And another opportunity is to expand our service territory. I think both are challenging. On keeping customers on the C&I side, Don Bray and Amy and Monica are working to develop some long-term contracts with existing customers so they don't leave us. And so it's, we are working on that. Let me think about, I think maybe in terms of the next budget, which we'll be talking to you about starting in June and August, we'll see, we need to see about whether this load decrease is really going to come about. But your question about whether we need some additional resources to go after getting new revenues, that's a good question. I don't think we need that staffing resource right now, because it will take some time. If you want to get a new city into a CCA, it takes about 2 years to get them in, and several folks in this group have been involved, especially Don Bray has been involved in bringing in new customers, in fact, all of us. So I'd say not at this point.
Thank you.
Great. Okay, Liz, Rod, and then Carmen.
So thank you. I just wanted to mention for the benefit of the board that the executive committee met and discussed this quite a bit with staff along some of the lines of the conversations that are here. And I think the main point that I took away from that discussion is that our organization continues to be and needs to continue to be resilient, flexible, agile, whatever you want to call it. And if we think about all the issues that have been brought to the board in this past year, never mind 2 years, the number of contracts, the innovation, the programs, the legislative issues, and the regulatory issues, the world that the staff is dealing with is dynamic, to say the very, very least. And what I appreciated is that the organization is being agile to address those kinds of changes, to keep us with substantive risk management. I really liked the feeling that the risk was constantly being assessed. And that was where we came into the discussion about the data management. So overall, I thought that the discussion of the executive committee was very supportive of these modifications to the plan.
Rod? And then
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. I'm going to build on what both Howard and Liz said. I had several discussions with Girish, and then we had the discussion in exec. And I think, you know, I have to give Girish a lot of credit for going out and getting this audit done from somebody who's long been in the industry, another set of eyes. I think we would be prudent to act on it. I serve on both the risk committee and the exec committee, and you know, as Liz said, our world has gotten, and Howard said, our world has gotten a lot more complicated. We have benefited from many other CCAs coming on. Now, right, we're competing for power. The PUC and the legislature would like to throw us loops occasionally, and we have to be able to field and you know, return the ball to home plate. And so I think you know, having a data analyst and then to look at all these things to bolster our analysis of power, both these positions I think are well warranted, and I'm open to Girish coming back, you know, in the budget time and thinking further about you know, what our needs are. We've now taken a major step with commercial customers, and we know, you know, for all the residential customers who aren't paying attention, the big commercial customers will. So we can't afford to slip. We want the business. We can cover our overhead and then some, we believe, on this business, but we need to make sure that we are complying with the agreements that we've made. And so I'm enthusiastic about adding new people to the organization. You know, think about it from a labor point of view. It's a good time for us to be hiring, actually, in that sense.
Excellent. Thank you, Rod. Carmen, you had some comments or questions? Carmen, you are still muted. Sorry.
Am I saying my mute now, or can you hear me?
You are
good now.
perfect.
All right,
Tell us what
good.
you're thinking.
Yeah, I also had the opportunity to meet with Girish, and he explained to me about the positions, and I go, wow, those are futuristic positions because of all the data. It's fascinating, actually, and why those positions are important to maintain all that data. So just a few comments that our organization is still evolving, it's growing, and the fact that we are one of the lowest staffed organizations in this field. So with that, I'm glad that I'm good with these two positions. I think it's needed for us to really make sure that we're on top of it. So those are my comments. Thank you.
Thanks, Carmen. Okay, on the specific issue, because I gotta let Don actually finish the presentation. On the issue of these positions or staffing in general, does anyone else have any thoughts right now? We can bring it back up in a minute, but I would like to let Don actually finish the entire presentation. So nobody's raised their hand. Don, if you could finish us from here.
Thank you, Chair Miller. Just one slide to go. So we take, next slide, please. So that takes us then to the recommendation. So we are recommending approval of the year 2019-20 mid-year operating budget. Includes the creation of the CRCR fund and 12 million funding into that CRCR fund. And also approve resolution 2020-15, adding a principal power analyst, a senior data engineer, and adjusting the salary table for the Director of Decarbonization and Grid Innovations to be on par with the other directors. With that, that concludes my presentation. I'll yield to the chair for a vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Don. And for those following along, I was looking at the packet just to remind myself the job descriptions for both of these two positions were also placed into our packet along with a few other details. Does anybody have any comments? Now let's do questions first, then I'll see if there's a member of the public, then we'll do comments or wrapping it up with a motion. Any questions by anybody at this point? Both Don and Girish have done an exceptional job of making sure that we are all informed. So I'm not necessarily expecting any questions at this moment, but if there were, seeing none, let me quickly check to see if any member of the public wishes to comment on this item. I am seeing no members of the public jumping forward. Let me double check with our clerk. Is there any public feedback that you have received on this item?
No public comment on this item.
Excellent. Then we'll come back to the boards for discussion and or motion. Liz had her hand up first and then Nancy. Liz?
I was going to make a motion that the staff, that the board accepts staff recommendation to approve the fiscal year 1920 mid-year operating budget and resolution 2020-15, amending the position chart, job classification, and salary schedule.
I'll second that.
Okay, so we got Liz and we got Fred. Liz, did you want to make a comment or should I go to Nancy for her comments? Nancy, let's go to you. What do you got?
I was going to second, but I'll just say I support the motion.
Yeah, the hand raising thing is complicated. I applaud everybody who is raising their hands. Not to dismiss the person who was quick on the microphone with the second. So we had a motion from Liz and a second from Fred. Does anybody else have any comments? I have one summary comment, which is we are a highly successful business. Even in these uncertain times, even with dramatic impacts to our load, even with the world around us going crazy, we still are netting $20 million. I don't know many businesses, and I know no cities that are making that claim at this time. So this is a positive indication. We are a strong organization. We have the financial wherewithal to survive and continue our mission even in these uncertain times. And this didn't happen by accident. All of us showed up here in the beginning. We were all very cautious and conservative about how we wanted to manage our money and the financial choices that we were making. And I'm just proud that we continue to make enough money to invest in decarbonization while at the same time giving our paying customers a 4% discount to PG&E. And
I'd point out that the a certain IOU is still in bankruptcy. By
that's
comparison.
unfairly picking on the weak, Rod.
Sorry.
Good point.
People should be proud of where we are at. And the fact that we're adding positions in a down economy, let's just say that's good for the economy and it will help us in our mission as well. So with that, I got to turn to our clerk and we're going to get our roll call vote, please.
Thank you, Chair. Chair Miller,
Aye.
Vice Chair Smith,
Yes.
Gibbons,
Aye.
Sinks,
Aye.
Tovar,
Aye.
Fliger,
Yes.
Tyson,
Aye.
Rennie,
Aye.
Montano,
Aye.
Elahi,
Yes.
Martinez Beltran,
Yes.
Abekoga, Ellenberg.
Yes.
Thank you. That motion carries unanimously.
Excellent. Thank you to Don and your team for putting together this. Thank you to the whole staff because everybody did contribute. And thank you to my board members for helping us get through this. Liz, did you have a comment or did I miss you? Okay, hang on, my administration, let me take your hand down. Okay, we are now going to move on to item number 4. And it's the dynamic duo. So we finished with Don number 1 and we're now with Don number 2. So Don Bray is going to talk to us about customer relief and long-range community resilience. And this will be an action item.
So Chair Miller, I think I'll start with the first couple of slides. This is Girish. And so a little background. In April, the board approves setting aside $10 million for a program that we're calling the CRCR program, Customer Relief and Community Resiliency. Can you go to the next slide, please? So we are balancing on the left-hand side, in terms when we are providing customer resiliency and relief, mission-aligned fairness, long-term value. And it's not just the crisis that we are going through right now with COVID, but it's also what we know will be staying with us for many years, which are the PSPS events, which are involuntary shutoffs of power for extended periods of time. We want to make sure that we're not just preparing for our current emergency, but also for our future emergencies. So that was the kind of balance that we put together in our plan. And what you have in front of you is going to be a recommendation. And one of the things, as we are talking about this, there are so many ideas that we can follow in terms of providing relief. But part of this is we didn't want to let the perfect be the enemy of the good. We have 3 themed programs, 2 programs with each of those themes. And Don Bray is going to be presenting that to you. And we're really looking forward to getting these programs approved so that the support can go out to our community. Starting, essentially, we're ready to start moving a day or 2 after you provide us an approval. So I will now turn it over to Don number 2, Don Bray.
All right, thanks, Garish, and good evening, directors. Andrew, if we can have the next slide, please. So what I'd like to do is go through a slide here that introduces the main elements of the 3 programs that we're proposing this evening. I'd like to go through all of these, and then what we'll do is come back and go item by item and really drill into each one, basically taking questions as we go. But I think it's important to kind of provide framing on all 3 as we get started. So the first major program is about customer relief, and there are 2 elements to this. The first is a $100 bill credit that we are proposing to offer to all of our CARE and FERA customers. This is a low-income customer program that's been in place for many years. Roughly 10% of our customer base, residential customer base, is under CARE FERA, so about 25,000 customers currently. We are proposing this $100 bill credit being administered in 2 separate monthly credits, beginning at the end of May and going through July. We have the letter all queued up. We have a list queued up. We're basically ready to execute this just as soon as it's approved by the board to start to get relief out to our customers that are in greatest need. The second part of this program is about a bill credit to small businesses. So we have on the order of 10,000 small business accounts that fall under our smallest rate schedule. So these are typically mom and pop type businesses that are spread out across all of our communities. We would apply a $250 bill credit to eligible customers that respond back to us through a website portal that we'll be setting up, indicating that they have this need. The invitation would go out to about 10,000 customers. We would be able to support through this $1 million allocation about 4,000 credits. We're not really sure how many will respond, but that's how we've earmarked this. So a $250 credit to small business customers. The second major program is workforce relief, and this has 2 elements. The first is SVCE putting together an online training program, 6 hours of training and 5 online courses. We make these courses available to local contractors and tradespeople. And upon completion of the 5 online courses, the the participants get a $500 stipend. So in effect, we're paying them to take training. The training is about electrification, not surprisingly, building electrification, 5 different related topics, including an overview course that they'd be starting with. We have this designed at this point, and we think we can get this fully up and implemented by the end of June, hopefully getting the first checks out to participants by the end of next month if this is approved. The second element here is around implementing electrification at contractors' homes and businesses. We would envision a $3,000 support payment to certified contractors and tradespeople who implement a battery or a heat pump, space conditioner or water heater within their own home. So we're imagining we could cover 100, 150 of these at that $3,000 level. But the idea is to get tradespeople in our service territory hands-on experience with implementing these new technologies. And then finally, the third program is around longer-term community resiliency. 2 elements to this. The first is $1 million that would be allocated to all 13 of our member agencies, weighted by a share of SVCE load to support resiliency infrastructure planning. And the focus there being on electric infrastructure and maintaining electric infrastructure in the face of, say, a PSPS event. And then the second part of this is about the actual capital projects to deploy those systems. Again, load allocated across our 13 communities. So those are the 3 main elements. If Andrea, we can show the next slide real briefly.
Can I ask, or Chair, can I ask a question before we move on?
The plan, Fred and Nisa, who's raised your hand, Don noted, we're going to go through all of this overview, and then we're going to come back to the programs and do the questions program by program, if that's okay.
That's fine. Thank you.
Yeah, leave your hand up, and you're first on my list, and Nisa, you're second. Don, please get through this so that we can get back to those questions on the program.
Okay. Yeah, this is a quick one. So if we look at the $8.5 million or so of the funding that is in the first program and the third program, so we haven't included workforce training in this, it's a little harder to estimate. But if we look at 2 of the 3 programs, credits to customers and resilience, this is how we estimate the funding would lay out by member agency. Remember, a good portion of this is allocated on load. The rest is based on where we envision the customer credits going. And that's going to be a function of CARE-FIRA participation in a community and small business presence in communities. So just be aware that that we've applied this look to. This would be of interest to you, and we can come back to this as needed. So let's go back, Andrea, to the previous slide, and Chair Miller, I think we can open it up for questions at this point.
Excellent. So I'm sure everybody has questions about each one of these specific items. And I know some of us have had extensive talks with Don and or Garish. But for everything that's out there and for points that need to be made, we're just going to go by the order that you raise your hand. So let's start with Fred, and then I got Nisa. Go ahead, Fred.
Thank you, Chair. Don, thank you for this information. Yeah, no, just for the public's information. So when we look at sort of the customer relief, looking at roughly a $250 credit, and you had mentioned we're looking at roughly 10,000 businesses, so it comes out to about 4,000. How are we going about determining who is eligible? Who are those small businesses that are eligible, those customers? Just so the public knows and that this is how we're going to evenly distribute these funds here.
So eligibility is being determined by whether a customer has 2 or fewer A1 electric accounts. And A1 electric accounts are with our smallest business customers. That's the entry level, if you will, commercial account. So we're using that designation to identify small businesses. And then we are looking at customers by name who have 1 or 2 of those types of accounts. We have some businesses that have 400 A1 accounts because they have a cell phone system and every cell tower is an A1 account. So we're not considering those small businesses, but for a typical mom and pop type business, where they would have 1 or 2 A1 accounts, a small restaurant, a small office, et cetera, that's how we're determining qualification. We would send letters to those parties describing the program and essentially saying that if you have a need, because you've been impacted, you're eligible for a $250 credit. You have to apply for that coming back to our website. It's a simple application process. And then it's a first come, first serve against that $1 million.
No, thank you, Don. That was my follow-up question. Was it first come, first serve? But just for point of clarification, you had mentioned any small business that have 1 or 2 accounts, correct? So it's not 1, it's 2 or less, basically.
Correct. Yes.
Okay. Good. Thank you.
Yeah, the true small businesses. Anissa?
Thanks, Stuart, and thanks, Don, for the presentation. Fred covered one of my questions. I'll go back to 1A. That is the bill credit for those residential customers. And I want to confirm that all residential customers who fall into these categories will receive this credit, and will it just appear on their bills, or is it similar to the small business customer process where a letter will be sent and they have to then submit an application or some request?
Okay, great question. No, it's not similar to the business customer program. It will be automatically applied. So they will receive a letter. The letter will go out approximately 1 week before the credits will start to flow. And then the credit's going to appear on that customer's next billing statement, from us/PG&E.
And then the second question has to do with the training, the workforce training. Will we be providing that training? Is it virtual training, or will we just award this $500 stipend and it's up to the individuals to find training programs that qualify?
No, this is an online training program that we will design and implement, and it's asynchronous training. The participant can take it whenever they want, so it isn't an online course. It's not like a webinar that you attend. It's prepackaged training on, again, 5 different electrification topics. You all have probably done online courses before that are prepackaged. There will be a few quizzes embedded just to make sure that the participant is following along and learning something. And then upon completion of the 5 courses, the participant is entitled to $500. We are working with a local community college on using their platform to help deliver this. And we are working with some professionals in the building electrification space on actually deploying the content. And they have a lot of that developed, but we would be doing the filming. We'd be bringing together the content into this online package, inserting the quizzes, et cetera, and then making it available to participants.
And will there be a certificate or some kind of diploma at the end?
Oh, you bet. Yeah.
Okay.
To go along with the $500. Yeah.
Right. So people value that paper more than the dollars.
Yeah,
and-
I'd probably stop short of saying it's, that we're certifying them, or licensing them. But yes, we would definitely recognize their completion of the course.
Okay, and then my last question has to do with the last slide where you have the different allocations by city. How were those calculated? And maybe you touched on it, but I think, yeah. So for example,
So the
LaSalle-
green, so the green portions, the green parts of the bars here are the resilience program, and the two elements of the resilience program, the planning and then the actual deployment. Those are load allocated numbers.
Okay.
Okay. So just based on, say, Los Altos' share of SVC's overall load. The orange elements are those are the CARE-FIRA credits and the small business credits. And of course, those are going to depend on the composition of those communities in your respective city.
Thanks, Don. I look forward to the press release so that we can share this with our community. Thank you.
Don, can we go back one slide? And just on the CARE-FIRA, what happens, people are still in the middle of losing their jobs and stuff like that. What if somebody signs up 2 weeks from now? Will they get the second half of this, or are they just out? They have to be in already.
So this is a great question, and you're right. We are seeing more people sign up for this. Several hundred a week, in fact. Girish talked about the reserve amount, the reserve fund, the contingency. One thing we could envision would be doing another run of this, a month or two out to pick up new entrants into the CARE-FIRA program, especially if we're seeing the present circumstances persist. But that's how we would do it. We would have to take another snapshot, if you will, of CARE-FIRA customers, ones that have gone into that status more recently.
And a quick request of staff, we get our summary of the meeting afterwards for us to be able to communicate with our fellow council members. Can you guys put in a link or something so we can communicate with our public how they can sign up for the CARE-FIRA programs so that we can pass that on through our communication channels?
Absolutely.
And
Yeah,
then,
the sign up is through PG. Yeah.
Right. So just a pointer to that. Okay, so there are several more questions. We're going to do Yvonne, and then Rod, and then Carmen. And that's my start, but there'll be more. So Yvonne, go ahead.
Hi, thank you, Dawn, for the presentation. I'm really excited to hear about this program. This is fantastic. So a couple of questions that I have is when we're talking about the customer relief, I wanted to know, how will this be communicated other than, is this going in their bill? Is this going to be through, as you just said, social media? Is there a whole marketing plan behind how we're communicating this?
So in both cases, in the CARE-FIRA case and in the small business case, the prospective participants receive a letter directly from us.
Okay. So it's really through the letter.
Yeah. So we're sending a mail to their billing address. The residential letter is English on the front and then 3 different languages on the back. We've got that all built and ready to go. But the principal communication will be direct via mail to the CARE-FIRA customers.
Okay.
They're going to see a number on their bill too.
Right. Well, now the residential customers will be getting that automatically, the CARE-FIRA customers. But I guess with the small businesses, where they actually need to fill out an application, right? A very short application.
Yeah.
Is there any way to do that maybe on a postcard, or does that add an increase in cost just so that it's a different look since there's an action that they need to take?
Yeah, we've really debated the best way to do this, and concluded that probably the best, most foolproof, easiest way to do this is online. And we're also including a QR code. Somebody can scan their way
That's great.
their way to our website, from the communication, the letter itself. And then we have an identifier on the letter that helps us identify who the customer is, so that there isn't confusion that way. And then we ask a couple of short questions about impact, and then the application's complete.
Okay, so they're, even with the letter, they're directed to the website, and that's really where we're getting the information collected.
Correct. Yes.
Okay. I love the QR, by the way. And then I wanted to also ask, are we offering anything to not-for-profits? They're really struggling right now, and I wondered if there was any way that we could somehow offer. We've got the residents and we've got the small businesses. Is there any way to incorporate not-for-profits?
Yeah, I may let Garish jump in on this, but the one of the key markers for us in any of these programs, again, is bringing it back to our mission. So, how is this about electrification, decarbonization, versus a lot of other great needs that are out in the community right now. So as opposed to donating to a food bank or
right.
profit.
I want to qualify. I'm talking about not-for-profits that are customers. So if they are not a business and they're not-for-profit, do they qualify for this credit?
Wouldn't they be on the A1 rate also then?
I don't, that's my question, I guess.
Or not?
It would depend on the nonprofit. If it's a small nonprofit and they have a single office, they would be on the A1 rate.
Okay. So it would, again, be determined by whether or not they had the 1 or 2 lines.
A1 accounts, right.
A1 accounts, which is up to 2 lines.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. On the workforce relief, I wondered so you talked about that when they go online, they do this 6-hour course and they're trained in 5 of the topics. If I missed that, I don't want you to repeat it. But if you didn't cover what those 5 topics are, if you would, did you cover those?
I didn't, and I'm going to attempt to do the best I can off the top of my head here. There's one that's on Electrification 101. There'll be a topic on heat pump technology, and that's both for space and water heating. There will be a topic on appliances, all electric appliances. There will be a topic on sort of outdoor applications, so pools, saunas, that sort of, and various electrification technologies associated with that. And I'm not the last one is solar plus storage.
Okay. And then part of the reason I'm asking that is because I wondered if in part 2, when we're talking about the workforce release and they're actually installing, an electric water heater, if we could add, if they install an electric car charger, would that be something that we could have as qualifying for that rebate as well? And perhaps even an electric stove, or, if we could tie those to where those, where they're actually getting the credit for what they've maybe have been trained on, but all applicable to energy savings.
Yeah, again, it's certainly something we can look at. The three technologies we thought of initially were batteries, and then heat pump, space conditioning, and heat pump water heating, because those 3 things, tend to be bigger, a little more expensive, a lot less experience in the market with those technologies. EV charging is a little less expensive, little better understood. But yeah, I think that's something we could certainly consider, would be maybe some sort of packaging of these things
Right. I mean, I definitely see where your mindset is, and I agree with it that you're trying to go from for kind of the bigger, that aren't maybe as common. But I do want us to think about kind of casting the net wider, and especially if we're talking about, plumbers and electricians, they may not be in the market for an electric vehicle. But if we can help get them there to where they now have a charger in their home, I think that really sets us up to kind of reach some of those different groups, right? And then family and friends see, oh, that's great, you have an electric car. And so I just thought that would be something really great. And then maybe even the solar piece. I mean, I know to many people that's a common thing, but not to all groups is that something that everyone has in their home. So I would just love for us to maybe push that envelope, and hopefully we can include different populations who haven't had access to some of those before.
Just a quick comment, Yvonne, on these things, right? If you get a contractor's license as an electrician, you know how to install a 50 amp circuit. You've already been tested on that. You know how to do a car charger, and you know how to do the 40 amp circuit for the stove. So
Right.
they already have those skills, but they may not have the skills to go through the process of a heat pump water heater or a heat pump space heating. So we were actually not pushing the envelope like for the contractor to get something in their house, but to actually practice and demonstrate the skills that would push the envelope outside of what they don't already know. And solar is actually a totally separate contractor's license from electrician. And so that one is a little bit weird.
Yeah.
That's
If
just
I may add,
points. Garish?
yeah, sorry, I didn't raise my hand,
No, you're good.
but yeah, thank you. I think, Yvonne, I think of the three ideas you suggested, I think the first two, I think we can add into the program, but not the solar.
Okay.
I think we already provide carbon-free electricity, so I don't see that incremental value there. And whereas some of the solar installers can actually take advantage of the energy storage and add that in. So I think
And that's great.
Yeah, so we'll take a look at how we can package it, like what Don Bray was talking about. But those two, I think your point about where we are right now, it's casting a wide net, and there is a balance between how much this is going to move the needle in terms of new technologies versus also providing, local stimulus essentially to those who are hurting.
Yes, I think that's fantastic. Thank you for that consideration. And then I had one more on our final one, which was on the community resiliency. And my question was, is there any way to include in the community resiliency, we all are having challenges at the city level, but because we're looking at resiliency, and I think probably talking to, disasters and what's happened in our infrastructure and how we use that, how does fire and police, how would we be able to use any of those funds towards, maybe equipment for that?
So
I'm gonna
go ahead.
Yeah, I'm going to say, I'm going to also ask Rex Japanisich to provide an answer, but I think the short answer is probably no. I do know that public safety personnel are getting hit with these budget cuts, but because of the way we are set up in terms of being an energy-related agency, we can provide support where there is a nexus when it comes to energy. So I think there could be, if you're doing resiliency on a fire station or in a police station, if you're going to add something that's going to enhance the energy resiliency or reduce carbon,
Yes.
that we can spend money for. That's
Great.
not a problem. Yeah.
Or for new green construction. We've got to build a firehouse, so I'm thinking down the road.
Yeah, so as long as it's going to reduce emissions, so I think building decarbonization would definitely be something that we would support. Now, the timeline for this community resiliency program is rather long. So it's basically December 2021 when we're saying you finish your planning, in December 2022 to actually do the infrastructure. So if you have plans in it, I think it can be satisfied in the next 2.5 years.
Okay, thank you. Those are all my questions. Thank you.
Sure, we have Rod, then Carmen, and then George. Go ahead, Rod.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate this thoughtful program. I think it balances immediate need with resiliency that, you know, I'm keen to have us build in our communities. You know, the governor was yakking today about PSPS events and all of it. And for all of it, we know that during emergencies, there are critical facilities that we want to keep up and available. And there'll be more emergencies coming. So I think this program strikes a great balance. And I'm particularly interested in, you know, emphasizing the promotional aspects here. I think you said for the residential care and FARA customers, do they also get a letter from us, or is there just a bill insert?
No, it's a letter. It is, yeah, it's a
It
letter
is.
mailed to the billing address.
Right. So I think that's it. You know, I'll bet that most people that get this letter from us may never have heard of us before, whether that's a small business or a residential customer. So I hope, you know, we have enough space to tell our story, right? What we're about, reinforce the values, local, the ability to make decisions locally to help the community, that we're not just a company, we are an agency doing good in the world. So I'm excited about that opportunity to promote who we are. On the second one, the workforce electrification training, are we working with labor, organized labor on this?
Yes, John
Okay.
has been leading the development of the
Okay.
thing from our side and has been in touch with several local union organizations, kind of northwinding them on the fact that this is coming and looking to engage them in outreach. We may also look for their help just in packaging this. I mean, in terms of over the next couple of years, as we really put the wrapper around this and begin communicating it.
Yeah, I would hope that
market.
for, you know, the broad labor movement in our county, as well as labor movement across the state, we could receive some recognition so that, you know, they know what we're doing to help. This is a very sensitive time for many folks in the trades, and I think, yeah, we could improve our stock with organized labor, and that would inure to our benefit in a number of ways in the future. So, thank you. Those are my remarks. I'm supportive of this plan, enthusiastically so.
Forgot to unmute myself. Carmen, and then George, and then Javed.
Okay, thank you, Chairperson. So I have two questions on customer relief and workforce relief. So I'll start with the workforce relief. So who are you targeting? Are you targeting young folks, older folks, people that are, I'm just wondering who are these people that you're targeting for these positions?
So we are targeting contractors and tradespeople, relevant contractors and tradespeople. So, you know,
Okay.
electricians, mechanical, plumbing contractors, general contractors, etc. The workforce that's basically going to be necessary for us to electrify the built environment.
Okay, so that, yeah, they're kind of, it's sort of what Rod had asked about the labor unions, the trades unions actually. So that's why my next question was, how will you be reaching out to them? But you've already mentioned that with Rod. The other question on the customer relief. So you said that if you're going to send a letter to the CARE and FARA customers. So these customers are already in that program. They're already in the system because of their income level. So it's not really a COVID-19 focused relief program. It's more of a low income program, correct?
Yeah, historically, that's absolutely been the case. Over the past few months, really across the state, PG&E and the other major utilities, all of the CCAs now have really been promoting CARE-FIRA as a great way for customers to get relief generally. And the bar has essentially been lowered on CARE-FIRA applications. Pretty much anyone can qualify for CARE-FIRA at this point in time. The general expectation is that if you've been impacted by COVID in some way, if you are working reduced hours or maybe you've lost your job, apply for CARE-FIRA. Doesn't matter what your salary was last year. That's not of concern. Register for the program, get a 35% discount on your electric bill, which is what CARE-FIRA does for you, and get that discount going right away. So
I see, yeah, because so it's not, but that's not stated on the, I'm looking at my energy, my energy bill, and nowhere does it say in there about COVID-19 relief program. So I'm assuming only if you're already pre-qualified, because they go by your household size and they go by your income limits. So that's what we're focusing on, not really the, the general public wouldn't even know that they would qualify. So yeah, so I'm just concerned that the middle class, the one that's been hit the hardest, that have lost their jobs, and they don't know that they could qualify because on the forms it just says your income level, your household size, and so there's nothing in there that says if you were affected by COVID-19 you can apply. So anyway, I was just looking at that, and
Good news is PG&E has launched a giant social media ad campaign on this exact topic, and they've been running ads for 3 weeks. And staff's going to give us the link, so
good.
we'll have the opportunity to promote it in our own cities too.
That's great. I'm glad to hear that. Okay, well, those are my questions. Thank you very much.
Okay, now I have George and then Javed.
Yes, very good. Thank you. And thank you, Don. I have to say I approve very much of this strategy, and I thought, and I applaud your presentation for its clarity. One thing is I kind of blanked in the community resiliency. If you were to say what top 2 projects might a town do, what would be examples of those?
So a classic example would be implementing battery storage in such a way as to support energy resiliency at a critical facility.
Okay.
I think that the firehouse example came up, right? If the firehouse is a critical facility, is in many communities, right? Deploy energy storage there in association with, say, solar on the roof. You can run that firehouse 24/7 if the grid's down. So that would be an example.
Okay, very good. Thank you. And then if you turn to the next slide, slide 5, where you show the breakdown by towns, and I can see how it looks like the CARE thing is related to income levels of people. Rod knows I like to do math in my head. Do these numbers add up to $10 million?
No, they don't. And let me explain why. So there's $1.5 million that's off the table in this because it's the workforce relief programs.
Yeah.
So that money is going to contractors and to tradespeople. We're not really sure where they are, so we didn't have any way to estimate, by community how that would lay out. We'll know in the end, but we don't know now. And then there's some other reasons why it isn't exactly 8.5, which maybe I won't bore you with, but it's close.
All right, thank you very much.
All right. Javed?
Thank you. As I was listening, I mean, it's almost harder to give away money than to try to make money sometimes. Yeah, and Silicon Valley Energy, it's good you're keeping in mind what what our goals are, is basically to go towards carbon-free energy procurement. And I saw your chart on how much you had allocated for different cities, and what is for good reason is at the bottom at $22,000 there. There is a project that we are going to be going forward with. We have a building, an XC, that has been sitting idle for the last, there used to be a post office, but it's been sitting idle for the last 3-4 years. And we're trying to develop that into a community center. And I'm looking at that as a good project to be an energy-free project with the solar roof and all the, solar electric heat pumps and everything else. So would that be part of the resiliency that you're looking at? Because that will also be used if there's a PSP unit for the residents to come there and be able to charge their batteries, or have some place where there is at least the light and everything else.
That's another very good example of what the resiliency program is intended to address. Exactly that type of need. A community center is maybe even a better example in some respects than a firehouse, but because of the degree to which it serves many members of the community.
Sounds good. So when does this giving away start, I guess? When do you guys start cutting checks? When do you start accepting applications or?
As soon as you're ready, as soon as this is approved, and then as soon as you're ready. The idea in what we're showing in the timeline here is that planning related money would need to be spent by December 2021, and deployment money, capital project money, by December 2022. If you don't need your planning allocation, that 20% of the money, you can apply that to your capital project support. So say it's $22,000 for you, you could apply that, most all of that, to capital project support, if that's how it worked out best for you.
And is that the limit? I mean, would you limit that to $22,000 for monitoring, or does it depend on what project you're doing?
That's the allocation that's been laid out here by.
All right, great, thank you. I'll have somebody contact you, I guess.
Okay.
Well, let's get it passed first. Okay, does anybody else have any other questions of staff on this? Seeing none, there'll still be another opportunity. Let me go to the public and see if there's any member of the public that wishes to comment on these items. Well, it's this one item, but these various programs. Pause for a second. I am seeing no member of the public that wishes to comment on this. I'll come back. I'll ask our clerk, did we receive any comments from the public?
No, confirming I did not receive any emailed comments.
Okay, excellent. So I'll come back to the board, and if there are further questions and or discussion or motion, I'll take any of the above.
I'll make a motion to move for approval.
Second.
Okay, so that was Fred, and then seconded by Susan. Nancy, would you?
I'm still being very polite and raising my hand, but
I'm just going to have to say, for these motions, just jump in, or maybe I'll just call you.
Yeah, I think this is fabulous, and believe me, the staff at Sunnyvale already know about it, and our emails are going around. So I think it's fabulous, and thanks to staff for going to the work of giving away money, because I think Jeffy nailed it. It's really hard to get a program that's fair and well thought through and well communicated. So good job to staff, and very supportive. Thank you.
Thank you, Nancy. Carmen, you have a comment? Carmen.
She's on mute.
Yeah, unmute your
Okay,
mic.
sorry.
No problem.
Yeah, I just wanted to make a comment that our staff is also very pleased about this program because we will be able to buy some backup battery storage for the blackouts coming up. So yeah, they're happy. Thank you.
Okay, Yvonne, and I see you got support with you tonight. Does she want to wave to us?
Okay.
Oh,
Sorry.
You're being Zoom bombed right on the meeting. That's all
Yes,
good.
I warned you prior. So I just, again, I really want to commend the staff for doing this, for the board for moving forward. And I think we'll get an approval just now, but this is such a fantastic effort for us to put out there in the community, being one of the very few companies, as Howard and many other have said, that are in a good spot right now. I think it says a lot for us to lend a hand to the communities that we're serving. And so I'm really happy to see this come forward. I know that this will be a big benefit for us. I do wish there was a way that, I understand that the residents who are with Care and Farah will be getting the letters and the small businesses will be getting the letters, but I want everyone to know what's happening. And so as Carmen was talking, I was thinking, what happens to all of the other customers who don't qualify for Farah or Care? Will they be made aware that, you know, for example, myself, I would be thrilled to know that SBC has given to customers who are on Care and Farah, even though I myself might not get that credit. I mean, that would be great to know. And so hope that we can get that to all of our customers so that they're seeing the role that we're playing in our community.
Here. Should be a challenge to staff to get this story placed prominently in the Merck and other press outlets in the Bay Area.
There we go.
And incumbent upon us, each elected officials, to get the word out within our own city about how to sign up for Care Farah, and if you're a small business, how to apply.
That's
Javi,
right. And so Dawn, that somebody asked, and I don't remember who it was, to get that social media that we can pass on. It's so easy to do when we get it in that format. If you can get that to us, that would be really great.
Will do.
Javed?
Yeah, I just, I think that is really important because PG&E is giving away money because of their, they need it for their PR, you know. And I really want to make sure that when we do the program, people don't think this is more money coming from PG&E, because a lot of people still don't know that there's a separate entity out there. And if they get a rebate on their bill, they'll thank PG&E and not figure out that it's from Silicon Valley. So whatever way you promote it would really have to be intensive and focused, that people say, oh yeah, it's Silicon Valley Clean Energy. That was one comment I had. The second thing I wanted to just kind of go back on the numbers. Since Montecito is at the bottom, are you computing the allocation based on population, electricity use, clean energy use, or how are you coming up with those numbers?
It's calculated based on electricity use, and that's the same as voting shares. It's the same calculation that's used for voting shares with an SVC.
So us small cities, our only choice is to figure out how to use more electricity.
Well, I thought Montecito was using it a lot because we have a lot more electric cars out there.
Hey, Java, just build a lot of housing.
That was a higher number.
Just build
it's all carbon free, so.
Just build a lot of housing down there in Montecito, and you can have more next time.
Yeah, well, that'll be the day, I guess.
Yeah, that housing, you got your.
Okay, it is.
Yeah, I should talk.
To try and not let us go too far awry, does anybody else have any other comments on this particular item? Seeing none, I will turn to our clerk for a roll call vote, please.
Thank you, Chair. Chair Miller,
Aye.
Vice Chair Smith,
Yes.
Gibbons,
Aye.
Sinks,
Aye.
Tovar,
Yes.
Fliger,
Yes.
Tyson,
Aye.
Rennie,
Aye.
Montano,
Aye.
Elahi,
Yes.
Martinez Beltran,
Yes.
Abe Koga,
Aye.
Ellenberg.
Yes.
Thank you. That motion carries unanimously.
Great.
Thank you.
I'd like to thank our members of the staff for coming up with a, I think we did an exceptional job. I mean, people are worried it's not perfect, but this balanced all sorts of competing interests within our organization and within our own communities. And I think it showed sort of the spark of creativity in the way we go about solving problems that's unique to us. So thanks to staff for putting this together. Thank you to my fellow board members for supporting and engaging in this complicated discussion. Okay, next up is item number 5. And before we enter into item number 5, I have a stock ownership in the company that we're considering a contract with, and therefore will be recusing myself from this item. Nancy, who is our vice chair, is now our chair. I will be dropping off of audio and will not be able to hear what you're saying, and I will be dropping off of video. And somebody from staff is going to text me once you guys have figured out what you're doing. So unless anybody's got any comments or questions about that, I will drop off the audio and then you can all cheer.
Okay.
We are not going to cheer. It's good that we're following procedures, and I'm happy to introduce this item to authorize the CEO to execute a 20-year power purchase agreement with a company that staff will tell us about. So I believe that Monica Padilla, the Director of Power Resources, will be making the presentation. So Monica, please let us know what you've got for our consideration.
And she'll be unmuting shortly.
I'm just curious, where is all the staff zooming in from?
From their homes.
Oh, okay.
And we have several staff who are on the attendee list too, who are listening in. And I see Monica's name here, but it's still muted. So Monica, are you on? You're going to unmute and start. Okay, so why don't I go ahead with the presentation, and when Monica comes in, she can join us.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay, could we go to the next slide? So in spring of 2029, we put out our second RFP for RPS Resources, and the bullets above show you what we were asking for. It's about at least 10% of our needs. We issued the RFP in April, so it's almost a year later. And one of the things we've been telling you since January is we have about 6 shortlisted counterparties, and you've already signed agreements with 3 of them. Can we go to the next slide, please? So the 3 that you've already signed were signed in January, March, and April for 2 geothermal projects, and last month you signed up a project for solar and storage. So today we have a contract in front of you. It's with NextEra, Yellow Pine LLC. It's located in Nevada. It's connected to the California grid. It will serve about 4.1% of our load, and it's for 10 years. Next slide. More information in terms of what the technology is and the size. The rabbit brush contract that you signed last month was for 15 years. I see Monica's here. Monica, do you want to take over from now?
Sure, I'm sorry about that. I've had internet connection problems all evening. So this is my 4th time trying to connect, but.
Uh-oh, okay. It's back to you, Monica.
Yeah, so, okay. I'm sorry about that. Again, so the Yellow Pine product, or the Yellow Pine PPA, would deliver us PCC1 renewable energy as a solar plus storage or battery storage resource. The expected delivery term is 20 years, starting in December 2022 through November 2042. The project is located outside of California in Clark County, Nevada, but because it interconnects with the Cal-ISO kind of goes a little bit outside of California's borders, it is considered an in-state resource. Our share of the project would essentially allow us to take about 50 megawatts of solar PV, coupled with 26 megawatts of lithium ion battery, which would allow us to discharge over a 4-hour period. This project would meet essentially 4% of our load, and the contract is structured as a fixed price for the PV, and then a price for capacity related to the battery. This is similar to all the other PPAs we've brought to you, and there's no escalator there either. So the amount that we expect the contract to cost over the 20 years would be no more than $128,218,000. So in terms of how this helps us meet our long-term compliance requirements under Senate Bill 350, as you may recall, we need to reach a certain RPS level in different compliance periods, starting with the first one, 2021 through 2024. Our overall RPS requirement for that period is 40%, of which 65% of the RPS has to come from contracts of 10 years or more in term, resulting in essentially a 26% long-term RPS mandate for that first compliance period. And then it increases to 33% and 37% in the compliance periods that follow. Where we are today in terms of meeting that requirement is we're at 20%. And with the approval of this solar plus storage PPA with Yellow Pine, we'd get to 22%. So the project, because it comes online relatively late in the compliance period, we're not getting the full energy counting value for first compliance period. And then you can see how it goes up in the next 2 compliance periods. And you can go to the next step. So
okay, thank you. That's presentation.
Oh no, I'm still here. Can you hear me? Can you still hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Oh, okay.
You're choppy, a little choppy, so go ahead.
Yeah, I'm using my hotspot on my cell phone, sorry. So as Garish mentioned, we've negotiated several PPAs under this last RFO. The Yellow Pine Solar is the one we're bringing to you tonight. We have 2 more that we're currently negotiating. Both of them are solar plus storage PPAs as well. We hope to bring them to you next month for approval. But we have already indicated to our developers that if we don't get them negotiated in time for the June board meeting, they will essentially have to rebid into our RFO that we have out right now. And when all is said and done, through this RFO, if we execute all 6 days, you will have authorized us to spend roughly $777 million. You can go to the next slide. So once again, our request is that you delegate authority to the CEO to execute a PPA with Yellow Pine Energy Center 1 LLC for 50 megawatts of solar and 26 megawatts of energy storage, qualifying as a PCC1 resource for a term of 20 years and an amount not to exceed $128,218,000.
Thanks for the report. I will now open it for questions from the board members. Do any members of the board have any questions? Okay, I see George first and then Javed.
Very good, thank you. Can you put the slide back up?
Which slide?
Slide 5, please. Yes, so the 2028 to 2030 period, I see that the compliance is going down. Is that because some contracts are expiring in that time frame and so we don't count them anymore?
No, so one of the contracts that we that you approved, the COSO geothermal PPA, it in the first 5 years of that PPA, it delivers additional amount of energy, and then it tapers down in years 6 through 15. So what you're seeing there is that tapering down.
Okay, and then the next slide, you don't need to go to it. I think it shows us after our June contracts being at 25.6%. So I would compare that to the 26% gray line under number 3, right? And say we're pretty much hitting it.
Well, that's just for those for the PPAs that we negotiated under this current RFO. If you recall, we negotiated some additional ones under a previous RFO, which gets us to about, that's an additional 10%. So if we were to, if you can go to that next slide, Andrea, please. Yeah. So what this is showing here is that for on an annual basis, not a compliance period basis, but if you look like at a typical year, 2023, if all these projects that we negotiated under this RFO were brought online, we'd be at 25%. And so then you also need to add in the ones that we negotiated, and you have to look at it over the 4-year period for compliance period 4. And if you recall, some of these come on in 2021, some in 2022, some in 2023. So it doesn't get us to 25%. It doesn't get us to 25.6 plus 10% or 35% in compliance period 4. These are annual numbers.
I still lost that other 10%.
Yeah, so the 10% is not showing up here. And so if you wanted to basically assess how much RPS we would have in, say, year 2023, then you would add this 25% plus the 10%. So we'd be at 35%. And that's assuming that these contracts all get negotiated, the last 2.
So going back to slide 5, then we'd be in,
yeah,
we'd be in good shape.
Yeah, so this is over a compliance period. The next slide is on an annual basis. So this one looks at for 2021 through 2024, that 4-year period. So the 10% that we already negotiated, the big bow and the recurrent slate, those are accounted for in that 20% number already.
Okay.
Line 4.
All right. Thank you. Thank you for your answers.
Okay, thank you, Director Tyson. Next up is Director Elahi.
Yeah, thank you. This is a long-term process. I am curious as to the rates that you're negotiating. Are they, I don't know if you can disclose what those rates are and how do they compare with existing other contracts that you have. Are we paying more or less for these particular contracts? And are these fixed rates over the term of 20 years, or do they change based on the market or some other formula?
Yeah, so I can't disclose the exact rates because that is subject to confidentiality, but I can tell you that what we're paying per megawatt hour for the PV and then for the solar, for the battery capacity is very comparable to what we saw in the last RFO and what we're negotiating, what we have negotiated this far. In terms of do these prices change? None of these contracts have escalators in them, including the yellow pine. So the price that we negotiate is a fixed price over the term of the PPA. What does happen is you get degradation on the PV panels, and in some cases in the batteries as well. So while you're paying, but you're paying that based on whatever gets. If we expect to get 150,000 megawatt hours in year 1, but only get 118,000 megawatt hours in year 20, we only pay for 118,000 megawatt hours.
So you pay for what you get.
Exactly.
Up to the starting allocation is fixed, but it isn't like they're going to add some more storage to make that allocation.
For the battery, some of our contracts do have provisions in the battery that don't allow for degradation, meaning that the developer has to reinvest in the battery to keep it at a certain level.
Because I don't think these are going to last 20 years.
So I
No,
think
so they just replace them essentially.
So Girish, you had a comment?
Yeah, Javed, as far as the price is concerned, the contracts are available in unredacted form to all the board members coming to our office. But now that we don't have an office necessarily open, we can figure out another way to provide you that information. We'll work with Greg on that. So if you're curious about it, we can always do it offline.
I'm just curious on the comparison. So
okay,
somebody you can give us some comparison And maybe a price on one of them that gives us some idea.
It's competitive. It's very competitive, and it's going to be. It's essentially what we're finding in these RPS contracts. They're lower than the cost of the current short-term renewables that we are buying. So overall, our costs go down when we buy these long-term contracts. Of course, we are taking on more risk by committing to a longer period of time, but the unit cost is lower than what we're paying today.
Yeah, no, it is a balancing act. I am just concerned. Well, I don't think it's a level of concern yet, but with the oil having gone down below zero, it seems like a lot of people are, putting billions and billions of dollars into solar. And there may be a time in the next 10 years or so, 15 years, where you have an overabundance of solar energy. And and then storage and all that would help. So that's something to keep in mind, as much as it might look like we won't have enough. But there's vast fields being, 30-mile projects going on in Nevada and everywhere else.
We'll bring this up with you. This is a topic that is part of our strategic plan and integrated resource plan. And in fact, the state is looking at this in terms of overbuilding of solar already and the problems that causes. But yeah, it's different discussion though. We'll bring it back.
No, I'm sure you guys are on top of it.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, and just to kind of reiterate, so much of the procurement that we're doing right now is to meet a legislative mandate. So we have to procure renewable resources. It's a state law. And when we do our solicitations or our shopping, we administer a very competitive process. This last go around, we got over 150 offers or proposals. And we take a long time to evaluate those proposals. And then we take due time to negotiate really good PPAs as well.
Yeah, no, I mean, you guys are doing a phenomenal job. I mean, this is a very difficult process, especially when you're going out 20 years. So good job. Keep it up.
Great. Thank you, Director Elahi. Are there any other questions from board members? I see one. We've got, Director Montano.
I'm just curious. When staff goes out there and looks for these procurements, what's the main thing you're looking for? Is it the cost? Is it what's the main factor that you consider to contract with a certain organization versus another one? Just curious.
Yeah. So the first thing is that it has to be compliant. So it has to meet whatever requirements are set forth under the different legislative and regulatory mandates. Second, we definitely look at the value of the resource. And so the value is made up of two things: what it's going to cost us, and then what we think it's going to produce in the future in terms of energy. How much renewable energy are we actually going to get for this resource? And so that is the primary basis on which we select a resource. We also look at other things like, when is it going to come online? And what is the risk of it being delayed? And that's usually indicated by how far along it is in the development process, whether it's received the permits that it needs, how far along is it in the interconnection process with the California Independent System Operator. Those are all really important because it talks to the viability of the resource itself. We also look to try to diversify our portfolio and not buy everything as solar plus storage. So we'll look at other technologies like geothermal and wind and biomass if it's available. And then last, location matters too, because if you end up signing a whole bunch of contracts in the same location, like solar, all in the Central Valley, then you concentrate your risk of them underproducing relative to what you expected. So we use some data models to help us calculate a lot of this stuff as well.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, that's why I was wondering, because the one right there is it's Georgia, the one that we're going to vote on. That's in Georgia. So
it's in Nevada.
Oh, it's in Nevada? I thought it was in Georgia.
Yeah. No, it's in Nevada. But it's
so,
technically considered in-state. It's considered a California resource.
Oh, okay. So that's what I was going to ask you about the distance. Wouldn't it be better to contract with California providers instead of out of state? But then I guess you factor all that in, the cost and the distance and all that. Okay.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Okay.
Yep. It all factors in.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you. Any other directors who have questions? Okay, thanks. Nobody, I don't see any. So I'll go to the members of the public, and I don't see any hands raised there. So if a member of the public has a question, please indicate by raising your virtual hand. I don't see any. So clerk, is there any members of any received comments?
Not for this item, no.
Okay, so I'll take it back to the board for any further questions or a motion.
Yeah, I'll move to allow the exec to sign the contract.
I'll second.
A second.
Okay, so Director Elahi moved and Director Gibbons seconded the motion. Sorry, she just beat you.
That's right.
So I believe there's a couple hands up. Did you want to speak to your motion, Director Elahi?
No, there is just a simple motion to authorize the chief executive to execute the agreement.
Okay. And any Director Gibbons, did you want to speak to your second? No. Okay. Seeing no other hands raised or comments, we will turn it over to the clerk for a vote.
Thank you, Vice Chair. So Chair Miller is an abstention vote. Vice Chair Smith?
Yes.
Gibbons?
Yes.
Sinks?
Aye.
Tovar?
Yes.
Flagger?
Yes.
Tyson?
Yes.
Rennie?
Aye.
Montano? Montano?
Oh, sorry. Aye.
Thank you. Elahi?
Yes.
Martinez Beltran?
Yes.
Abekoga?
Aye.
Ellenberg?
Yes.
Thank you. That motion carries with one abstention.
Okay, and then we will get amused by Director Sink's face mask, and we will, while staff brings on.
He's back.
Okay, thank you. Howard?
I come back to this party. You guys have just been having fun without me.
I'm afraid it's true, yes.
Okay. Thank everybody for their indulgence. Recusal in this space is more complicated than us just walking out into the lobby. So I assume we've concluded item number 5, and next up is board member announcements and direction for future agenda items. Please, somebody tell me something about good news in your city, if somebody would.
Just general good news.
General good news is something we could all use right now.
So Campbell has a Campbell's Care in support of all of our businesses, particularly our small businesses, with placing orange ribbons all around the city. So if you happen to, for purposes that are approved under, you can drive through Campbell and see orange ribbons.
Excellent, excellent. Anybody else got any good news?
In the city of Cupertino, we are going to get an iconic big project built with 2,400 homes, half of them affordable, in a mixed-use project called Valco. If you haven't read the SB 35 judgment, you should. It's as legal opinions go. It has some spicy language in. So.
It's substantial.
I could consider it good news. I'm not sure my fellow council members would, but I'm happy.
Well, Saratoga did approve their massive SB 35 project, and we're expecting 91 units with 10 affordable units, just overwhelming the city. So congratulations, Rod. Carmen?
Congratulations.
Unmute.
Oh, okay. Yeah, we are going to be having Trader Joe's come into our specific transit area near BART, right across the street from the Great Mall. So,
wow, congratulations.
Yeah, it's a big thing. Thank you.
Yvonne?
Thank you. I'm really excited to share in the city of Morgan Hill. We have started a local community fund, a disaster relief fund. When everything happened with the Destination Homes and Sacred Heart, they'd run out of money. I started talking with some different people, and we were able to come together with our community foundation and start this disaster relief fund. So it will not only be for COVID, we'll be setting up something with COVID. We're working with, we've identified 2 not-for-profits so far that do rent relief and assistance and also financial assistance. And so they will be providing that to people who apply. And then there'll be hopefully also some not-for-profits that can help small businesses. And it's been a big push, but I really want to thank the Morgan Hill Community Foundation for kind of taking the idea and running with it and just being so supportive and helpful. And just as it is to our fund, I think, you know, this is going to help so many people with the rent, which is, I don't know what everybody else is hearing in their communities, but this is the #1 request that I hear about, is people not being able to pay their rent, and their shelter is their first concern. We're all talking about affordable housing on here. That's the first concern they're telling me. You know, I've heard many times I can get family to maybe pitch in for food or, you know, use some of the local resources, but I can't find anybody to pay my rent. So I just thought I'd share that with you.
Congratulations. Nancy.
Yeah, I can't raise my hand because I'm still a co-host, but I did want to share 2 things of good news from the city of Sunnyvale. One is, we recently provided $26 million for affordable housing from our in lieu fees. So it's going to, we've got 3 applicants building affordable housing. And so, yeah, there's some exciting things happening there with our $26 million toward affordable housing units. And then
that's more than our whole city budget.
And then lastly, at our last council meeting on May 5th, we approved the elimination of fines on overdue library materials. We were the last holdout in the county to still have fines, and we no longer have fines.
Yay.
Okay, good.
That's our news from Sunnyvale.
David.
Well, I guess based on the $22,000 Montessori is going to apply for, compared to, I'm not sure what the Sunnyvale handout is. So if you guys spend 20 million or more on housing, I'm proud to say that Montessori donated $5,000 to West Valley Community Foundation for their housing needs. So it's probably the same ratio.
Every bit helps.
Every bit helps. Thank you.
All right. Does anybody have anything else or anything we want to request staff bring back at a future meeting? Seeing none, Nancy.
No, I don't have anything. I was just gonna say that I watched the Planet of the Humans, and there's maybe some discussion materials in there, but it was entertaining. So if you haven't seen it yet, maybe watch it and absorb it.
What's the name of it? Planet?
It's Planet of the Humans.
Okay. Thank you.
Available on Netflix, I assume?
Yeah, I forget if it's Amazon Prime or Netflix, but it's one of those.
It's
YouTube.
YouTube.
Netflix. I think you
YouTube.
It's YouTube. Thank you. That's the one.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to feel, if it's not a feel-good movie, you will not feel good afterwards, but.
Okay.
Okay.
It'll be a shocker.
Stick with Pixar. Okay. Let me double check with the clerk. Are we missing anything?
Yes, Chair, we actually received a public comment for item 4, which was regarding our program outlines for COVID customer relief and longer range community resilience. So I would just like to read that into the record so we acknowledge this public comment.
That would be perfect.
This came in from Mike Richardson, and it reads, "It seems like the customer relief does focus only on low income and does nothing to help middle class families. Don't we all pay into this community relief fund?" And that ends the comment.
Perfect. Thank you. Okay, so with that, and no other comments from anybody I'm seeing, I think we will call this meeting up. Garesh.
Sorry, just one. You'll be getting an email later tonight with the summary of statements you could make at your city council meeting and also social media posts. So you should get that later tonight.
Perfect. We actually very much appreciate those. I wish every agency did it, but this agency always seems to be ahead. So thank you for that little innovative tool. It very much helps us as elected officials. Okay, and with that, I think we're going to call this meeting adjourned, and I want to thank everybody for participating tonight.